Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our Creator and Redeemer. Amen. One of my best friends is named Kitty, not a cat, it's a person. Bill and I overlapped with her at Everett College, and we sort of stayed friends over a number of years. But when we moved back to St. Pete, we discovered that Kitty and her husband Ed just lived a couple blocks from us. And our casual relationship has grown into a deep friendship. I often check in with Kitty as her early morning walks takes her around the seawall, which ends up right in front of our house. We carpool to our justice ministry fast together. And that's a big relief to have somebody to carpool with those long drives. And while we're doing that, we share conversations about our various justice work in our church and our stories about our kids and grandkids and our husbands. Well, 2 years ago, she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. That's a terrible cancer of the bone marrow. She discovered that she was a candidate for stem cell replacement therapy, in which all of her bone marrow was destroyed by chemotherapy, and new bone marrow was grown using her own stem cells. A large circle of friends, which included me and Bill, volunteered to be temporary caregivers to spell her husband. It took us 3 hours of training to get qualified to do that while she was recuperating. And she's now in remission. But not long ago, after another blood test, she was told that it looks as if she's not going to be eligible for a second round of stem cell therapy, and she will remain in remission for another 2, 3, 4 years. In all that time that Kitty has struggled with this terrible disease, only once have I ever heard her express despair. She has her good days, and she had her bad days. But the worst was, it was one of our rides up to North County for a fast meeting when she told me she'd been losing weight. It was easy to see. She didn't have much energy, and a recent blood test came back with ominous results. But once she got her diagnosis, Kitty always looked for ways to live with gratitude for the grace that she has received. I'm in awe of how she expresses her gratitude for God's grace and her capacity to take each day as a gift. Out of her sense of gratitude, that she is a beneficiary or a recipient of God's gift, she's recommitted herself to spend her time with and for people that she loves and the things that she cares most about. She and her husband are spending more time with grandchildren, their children. She's recommitted herself to work for justice for those who have been impacted by systemic injustice. And every day she is intentional to enjoy nature and to spend time with friends and to support her congregation. There is a lot of healing, gratitude, and justice going on in our scriptures today. These are two really, really interesting stories. God cures and heals a foreign general, Naaman, sometime enemy of the Israelites, with a humbling prescription. Jesus cures 10 lepers in a disputed no man's land, and only one comes back to say thank you. What can we learn from these ancient stories of miracles that help us find a path to awakening, to our awakening, that we too are recipients, beneficiaries of God's gifts, and by living with this humility and awe, are then called to share our gifts with others? Let's think about miracles. The Reverend Dennis Tamburello suggests that we tend to think of miracles as divine interventions into human affairs that circumvent nature, right? Most of us believe that an all-powerful God has the ability to, if you're walking under a really tall building and a brick just happens to drop and the wind isn't blowing, God could make that brick avoid dropping on your head. Does God do that all the time? That's the questions that we ask when we think about when we think about miracles that way. Why would God work such a miracle for somebody and not for another? Why do miracles happen with bad people and not good people all the time? Well, there's another way to think about miracles. Tamburello suggests that this other way to understand miracles is to see them as events that generate or increase faith. Events that move us closer to God, or open a window on what God is doing in the world, and show us how we too can join with God in this work. They might be good candidates for miracles. Let's look at the story of Naaman. This is one of my favorite stories in Scripture. This was a very powerful man, blessed by God, we were told, who had the misfortune to catch leprosy. Now, leprosy is now a curable disease, but for thousands of years, it was, you got leprosy, you became an outcast. It's now a bacterial, we know it's a bacterial disease that eats away the flesh of your skin. People lost limbs and fingers and toes and... Well, he obviously wasn't showing me any more long-sleeve clothes, so nobody knew he had sores yet. With all the resources available to this Syrian general, he hears about an answer for a cure from a very unlikely source. Do you remember who? It was this young girl who had been captured from an Israelite raid in Israel, who was now a slave to his wife, who told his wife about this prophet in Israel, Elisha, who could cure him of this horrible disease. And this is the miracle. He believed her. So he went to his king, and he said, I need a passage, a letter to the Israelite king, to let me go into Israel so that I can get cured by this prophet. So he gets this letter, and he goes to the Israelite king, who panics, thinking, oh my God, this is a scam. He's setting me up for a war. But lo and behold, Elisha, that's another miracle, heard through the grapevine that this Syrian general needed a cure. So he tells the king, send him to me. So Naaman goes out to the place where Elisha lived. He stopped at the gate. Elisha sends out one of his servants to Naaman and his retinue and says, fine, all you have to do is go to the Jordan River and wash yourself 7 times. Naaman is irate. He's just furious. I want to see the doctor, not a receptionist. I'm owed more than that. I'm an important guy. You can't treat me like this. The Jordan River, this dirty, yucky little river, I don't want to go in there. But his servants, this is another miracle, convince him, look, if it works, why don't you do it? What's going to happen? So he believes them. And he says, all right, I'll do it. And he goes and he washes 7 times in the Jordan River. The 7th time when he comes out, all his sores are gone. He's completely cured. Now, he could have just gotten on his camel or horse or donkey or whatever he rode and gone back home and, not done anything. But he saw the work of God right there. And he went back to Elisha and he said, thank you. And praised God for his healing. So, there was a cure and a healing. He was cured when he got out of the water. He was healed when he realized that it was God that did this. Let's look now at the story in the New Testament. Jesus is traveling through a sort of a no man's land between Galilee and Samaria. And it's not a safe place to go, so you had to kind of watch out. And he comes upon a small village that probably was a leper colony, because lepers were outcasts and thrown out of the regular places where they lived. And they often lived in small colonies with families that were brave enough to stay with them and helped with food and so forth. They were treated as outcasts and segregated from society. Well, the 10 lepers respectfully approach Jesus. And they call out, "Master, Jesus, have mercy on us." And Jesus listens. He turns to them and he simply says, "Go and show yourself to your priests." He's telling them to obey the Judeo's law, the Levitical law, that it was the priest who then certified that they were in fact well. Purification. And it's while they're on their way to see the priest that they notice that their sores are all healed. Well, one of the lepers, when he discovers that he was cured, goes back to Jesus. And you remember who that was? It was the Samaritan, who himself was a double outcast. Not only did he have leprosy, but he was also a Samaritan who was a dread enemy of the Israelites. He runs to Jesus, kneels at his feet, and thanks him. And Jesus' response to everyone there is to reflect, "Were not 10 made clean, cured? But of the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God, except this foreigner, this outcast?" And then Jesus gently tells him to get up and go on his way and live a new life. Your faith has made you well. This man had not only been cured of his illness, but he had been made whole. He'd been healed. He, like the general Naaman, was given the spiritual gift of humility, knowing that he was the recipient or beneficiary of God's grace. Over and over in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus, who always acknowledged that he was the beneficiary of God's grace and gifts, goes out to share those gifts with those who are outcasts. Read through the book of Luke. To the woman who anointed his feet at a banquet, to the woman with the flow of blood, to the blind beggar, Jesus healed and was thanked in return, blessing God. Diana Butler Bass, in her very interesting book, Grateful, the transformative power of giving thanks, contrasts 2 models of gratitude. The standard model of gratitude, she suggests, is a closed cycle of gift and return bound by social obligation and indebtedness. Dr. Bax then says if we change the closed system to an open one, brandishing transaction and substituting grace, gifts are not commodities, gifts are given by God. Grace reminds us that every good thing is a gift. Then we understand that all benefactors are also beneficiaries, and all beneficiaries can be benefactors. In other words, gifts come before givers. We do not really give gifts. We recognize gifts, we receive them, and we pass them on. We all rely on these gifts. We share them. This is an infinite process of awareness and responsive action. I suggest that this open system of recognizing gifts we receive from God and each other and passing these gifts to others is at the heart of the beloved community. It begins when each of us acknowledge that we stand in need of healing at times. Sometimes the healing we need is physical or emotional, relational, or spiritual. If we don't recognize that we are in need of God's grace and that we are not in charge of our fate, we will not be able to accept God's gifts of grace. Once we accept that we need God's grace and receive God's gifts with humility, we can then begin to share these gifts with others. It took me many years to realize that the privileges I enjoy are not of my own making. I also learned that because of my privileges, particularly as a white person, are not earned. I am not afraid now when others, particularly people of color, are empowered. I have become more grateful for the gifts God has given me. I've taken to heart Jesus' message to those he healed, to go and do likewise. I share my gifts through our Justice Ministry Fast, building power with others who express their gratitude for God's grace to get affordable housing for my neighbors. I bring God's gift that has given me to stand with children who are abused and neglected. I'm grateful every day that God gives me the energy, the wisdom, and the courage to follow Jesus into the in-between places to work with others, to bring healing as Jesus showed me. I'm grateful also that I'm part of this Good Samaritan family, this beloved community that follows Jesus' command to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I pray that all of us will continue to accept and acknowledge God's gift of healing, wholeness, gratitude, and justice. Amen. Let us stand and sing. What are we singing?
Live into hope.
Live in a hope, thank you.